Have you ever sat in a beautiful church building, yet felt completely alone? You sang the hymns, you bowed your head, but God still seemed miles away. What if I told you it's not necessarily your fault? Welcome back to Shepherd's Thoughts. I'm Brian Cedarquist, and far too many of us walk through the motions of Sunday service, small group, daily devotions. Yet we wonder, is God really there? The surprising truth is that most Christians feel distant because they're looking for God in the wrong places. Way too many Christians feel distant from God, and we need to avoid these mistakes. We need to avoid this, and there are 3 mistakes that I've listed for you in this video, and at the end, a small challenge. The first mistake, it's small but huge. To understand it, why we feel alone, let's step into Israel's sandals. Imagine you're part of a nomadic caravan. There's no permanent home, no downtown synagogue, only the promise of a portable sanctuary. In Exodus chapter 25, God gives Moses a blueprint for what it looks like to have a fancy camper van, a tent that they can tear down, pack up the poles, and carry every time they move camp. Inside the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the lampstand, glowing night and day. On the outside, the cloud of glory resting on top of it, guiding the journey. A cloud hovers above your head. You feel the mist. You sense the warmth. Your family brings grain offerings. The priest, they burn incense. You're confident God is here. Israel knew when God was present in their camp. Etched itself on Israel's psyche. They learned to equate faith with a frame of fabric. Fast forward to Solomon, who thinks, let's build God a castle. He pours cedar, gold, onyx into a building so grand that centuries later, people trembled. But then, in 587 BC, Babylon sieged, splintering those walls, scattering the stones. Imagine kneeling at the threshold of the temple, the choir's final note hanging in the air, then silence. Today, we replicate their mistake. We treat our sanctuary, a stage or a meeting or an event or a worship time as the controlling of God being near to us. We hunt for the experience, the high, a stirring of a worship song, a powerful altar call, packed house, wondering why our faith sometimes feels so alive, but yet hours later, so dead. If our spiritual barometer is the echo in these halls, we're living on a roller coaster. Mountaintop highs in service, valley low doubts, maybe on Monday or Tuesday. That's the building mentality. That's the first mistake. It's chasing locations for God's presence. But here's the pivot. God never intended to be boxed in any fabric or stone. His true dwelling place is far more personal, starting inside of you. We've uncovered the building mentality, chasing the 4 walls for God's presence. But his true dwelling place is not a location, it's a person. And that leads us to the second mistake, the missing person, where we maybe neglect the Holy Spirit. After Jesus rose, he told his disciples, I will ask the Father, and he will give you a helper to be with you forever, John 14:16 says. Yet most of us treat our bodies like empty temples, forgetting that the Spirit lives inside of followers of Christ. Paul drops this bombshell in 1 Corinthians 6:19. He says, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you. That means that every breath you take, every decision that you make happens in God's living room. But how often do you invite him into that? Maybe you rush into work, drown out the noise, carve out 30 seconds to quickly maybe mumble a prayer, if that. You wouldn't ignore your closest friend for hours. Then wonder why the conversation feels so stale. Yet, we do exactly that with the Holy Spirit. This neglect creates a vacuum. We try to fill it with rules, rituals, apps, scrolling, reminders, notification that we got to do our Bible reading, even other people. But none can satisfy the longing God himself places in all of us. This is the second huge mistake. It's ignoring the Holy Spirit that is in you. The cure? It's to treat the Spirit like the resident he is. Talking to him in the kitchen, thanking him on your commute, asking him wisdom before you swipe that card or send that text or make that phone call. Your life transforms when you live out of his presence, not your own power. Now, we've talked about chasing the location, and we got to stop that. And we've talked about inviting the Spirit in, but there's one more barrier, there's one more mistake that keeps us distant. It's being a solo act, undervaluing really the global church. Peter calls us living stones, being built into a spiritual house, like it says in 1 Peter 2:5. Paul says we're being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 22. Yet too often we go at it alone. We binge watch sermons, watch Shepherd Thoughts videos, read devotions, and then close the book, close YouTube, and go solo. Missing the power of shared faith, like it says in Hebrews 10:24 and 25, where we're urged not to neglect the meeting together because community fuels our faith. When a handful of believers gather, real people, real stories, God shows up in a fresh way. It's not the building that matters, it's the body. And every time you join another Christian, you help construct God's living temple on earth. Isolation leaves us vulnerable to doubt. Community reminds us of God's faithfulness in each other's lives. It really reignites hope when our lanterns flicker. The mistake is going at it alone instead of building community together. So this week, don't just stream a sermon. Grab a cup of coffee. Sit down with a friend. Share how the Spirit has been walking with you. Maybe join a small group at a local Bible preaching church, because when we build together, God's presence becomes impossible to ignore. And we have to bring this home. We have to act. We've uncovered 3 mistakes that leave many Christians feeling distant from God. We've talked about chasing buildings, which is believing His presence is tied to a location. We've talked about neglecting the Spirit, treating our bodies like empty vessels instead of God's temple. And we've also talked about going at it alone, missing the power of sharing faith and community together. But there's an incredible upside. God isn't locked behind a stained glass or an altar call or altar rails. If you are a follower of God, follower of Christ, He's moved in, right into you. He's inviting you to live in that reality every single moment. Imagine starting your day by thanking the Spirit for His presence in your coffee cup routine. Imagine confessing your struggles to a friend, feeling God's comfort through community. Imagine worship not on a Sunday, at a Sunday event, but as a heartbeat, constant, intimate, life-changing. Here's your 3-step challenge for this week. I want to encourage you to talk to the Spirit. Invite Him into your errands, into your work, into your rest. Secondly, build together. Reach out to a fellow believer. Share a prayer request. Join a small group. But thirdly, you have to live it out. Remind yourself daily, I am God's dwelling place. So I would encourage you in that challenge. There's 3 parts to it. Talk, build, and live. Which step will you take today? I'd encourage you, make a note, write it down below. I read every reply and I will be praying for you. If this video helped you see God closer, hit a like and subscribe so that we can help more believers stop feeling distant. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear these truths. Thanks for watching Shepherd Thoughts. Remember, God's not just coming, He's already here. Let's live like it. See you next time. God bless.